Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. I'm Jenna Ellis. Join me tonight on the Salem News Channel at 9 p.m. Eastern for Jenna Ellis Tonight. So much breaking news over the weekend and just today. The pick is in. Senator J.D. Vance from Ohio will be Donald Trump's running mate. So we'll bring you all of that news and analysis, as well as Judge Cannon saying that Donald Trump's documents case out of the state of Florida has now been dismissed. What does that mean for Donald Trump moving forward for his D.C. case from the DOJ? And what about the Democrats saying that this would impact Hunter Biden? We will have all of the legal analysis on this and more. And also Pastor Jack Hibbs joins to talk about the assassination of Donald Trump and how Americans, and especially Christians and conservatives, need to respond and pray for our country. Tune in tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. So breaking tonight, the pick is in. Donald Trump has officially selected Senator J.D. Vance from Ohio as his vice presidential running mate. So the two were officially nominated in Milwaukee earlier today at the first day of the RNC convention. But the announcement came via Trump's Truth Social. This is what he posted on Truth Social announcing his pick. Quote, after lengthy deliberation and thought and considering the tremendous talents of many others, I've decided that the person best suited to assume the position of Vice President of the United States is Senator J.D. Vance of the great state of Ohio. J.D. honorably served our country in the Marine Corps, graduated from Ohio State University in 2 years, summa cum laude, and is a Yale Law School graduate, where he was the editor of the Yale Law Journal and president of the Yale Law Veterans Association. J.D.'s book, Hillbilly Elegy, became a major bestseller and movie as it championed the hardworking men and women of our country. J.D. has had a very successful business career in technology and finance, and now, during the campaign, will be strongly focused on the people he fought so brilliantly for, the American workers and farmers in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Minnesota, and far beyond. So this pick has had mixed reaction from the MAGA and also Republican base. A lot of MAGA is very excited about this pick, but others wanted to see someone a little more conservative, especially when J.D. Vance has, even in recent days, championed abortion pill access for women and has really backed off of a lot of the more conservative priorities that a lot of people would like to see. But as President Trump said in his statement, likely J.D. Vance will be able to make some headway for the campaign in those significant battleground states. This also coming as Donald Trump has had another significant win today with the dismissal of his documents case out of Florida. This is what Judge Cannon wrote in the opinion. It says in part, former President Trump's motion to dismiss the indictment based on the unlawful appointment of funding of special counsel Jack Smith is granted. In accordance with this order, the superseding indictment is dismissed because special counsel Smith's appointment violates the appointments clause of the United States. She also goes on to say special counsel Smith's use of permanent indefinite appropriation also violates the appropriation clause, but the court need not address the proper remedy for that funding violation given the dismissal on the appointments clause. So let's welcome in Gerard Filliti, who is the Lawfare Project's senior counsel, to discuss all this and more, and especially two significant wins, I think, coming off of this just utter tragedy in Pennsylvania over the weekend with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. So much to cover. So Gerard, where do you want to start?
I would like to start with the attempted assassination and say that my heart goes out to Donald Trump and his family and the families of the victims here, that this was a tragedy that could well have been avoided. The rhetoric has become so heated on the other side that this is where we've gotten to, where we have to worry about safety when we are exercising our rights to campaign and to speak. So this is really something that I hope Joe Biden is true to his word, and he does put more of a cap on the rhetoric that's coming, at least from his side, and that we can resume some sort of civility where we don't have to worry about assassins at a rally. We need to do better. I think this is a good wake-up call for everyone.
Yeah, really well said. And I've been not surprised, but obviously incredibly disappointed to see that a lot of the Democrats' rhetoric has been sort of a both sides approach and suggesting that somehow Trump's own rhetoric, led to this. I mean, there's absolutely no excuse for political violence on any side. And I think that Republicans and conservatives would be roundly condemning this if this were an assassination attempt of President Joe Biden. And yet it was his own rhetoric just days before this event that said, we need to, put a bullseye on Trump. I mean, this type of rhetoric just absolutely needs to be toned down. And I think Speaker Johnson was right. The temperature needs to be turned down here. But this really is a good day moving forward for Donald Trump. He said he's not going to let the shooter or this attempted assassination prevent him from going as scheduled to Milwaukee. He did make his vice president pick today of J.D. Vance. What do you make of that pick and how strong the Republican ticket is?
J.D. Vance is not an unexpected pick. In the last few weeks, he's been talked about frequently as the most likely candidate to be in that position. He shares a lot of Trump's ideology. This is a solid pick for Trump because there is no real daylight between the two. There's ideological purity, if you will, within the MAGA movement. So Trump has, as a vice president, someone he is confident will express his views, even when he is not in a position to express them himself. So this at least cements the Republican Party as being influenced by the Make America Great Again mentality and everything that Trump has succeeded, more so than with other picks. It's also a smart choice because we are really looking at the so-called Rust Belt states, the swing states, to carry this election. And while Donald Trump is doing great in those states right now, it gives him a bigger cushion because Vance is popular. He knows the language, he knows the people, he understands the issues. So that does give Trump an edge when communicating his message, the message of the Republican Party, to those crucial battleground states. So from these perspectives, it's a very strong choice. And even on abortion, J.D. Vance is not one to shy away from disagreeing necessarily with a party platform and sharing his own personal opinions. And people want that integrity. They want that honesty, even if they don't agree with his views necessarily. They do want someone who can speak their mind. So I think Donald Trump made a very good choice. There were others he could have made as well. I don't think he could have made a bad choice because we've seen how he conducts government and the people he surrounds himself with. So this is a solid choice that will serve him well.
And certainly, Senator J.D. Vance is no stranger to speaking his mind. Do you think that it's going to hurt him at all, some of the prior rhetoric that he had in 2019 and moving forward, going as far as calling Donald Trump, likening him to Hitler, some of these other pieces of rhetoric that, as a never Trumper at the time, that that the Democrats are just going to pounce on in some of their negative opposition research campaign ad drives?
Sure, they're going to be happy to pounce on it, but then again, don't we want someone who has the intellectual growth to see the error of their ways and to come to a different perspective when they've been exposed to rational arguments for a better policy and a better way of doing things? I think that's what makes Vance such a strong candidate. He came around to see what was the strongest candidate for president, and that's Donald Trump. So once he actually exercised his incredible power of thinking, and he has the qualifications for it, certainly with his pedigree, he came to the light. And I think that tells the story of America itself, how we see things and want to improve. And when we see something that's in front of us that'll make our lives better, we go with that. I think that's the narrative that we'll hear coming out of the Trump campaign, and that will go very well against whatever spin the Democrats have coming.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that also resonates with a lot of us who, in 2016, Donald Trump wasn't my first choice. But then after he got the nomination, I did support him and, voted for him over Hillary Clinton. And then in the 2020 campaign, worked for him and was a very enthusiastic supporter because I got to know him. I got to know his policies. I got to know what his position really was in terms of making America great again. And so I think that message really will resonate with a lot of people who've gone through that similar transformation themselves, especially people in the Rust Belt states, as you mentioned. But in the last few minutes here as well, I want to shift gears and talk about, speaking of thinking just rationally, solidly, there's a lot of uproar over Judge Cannon's dismissal of the documents case. This, of course, was not unexpected, and yet I think this was a huge blow to the DOJ and may ultimately have some impact on the DOJ's case out of DC as well, because if the special counsel violates the Constitution's appointments clause in this case, wouldn't it in DC as well?
Well, that's the same argument that Trump has got to be making in D.C. as well. The issue is it's a different court, different circuit. This is not something that would control D.C. However, this is something that will almost inevitably end up before the Supreme Court. I can't see the DOJ not appealing this to the 11th Circuit because this is such a powerful loss. It defeats the very notion of having special prosecutors or special counsel that can be appointed willy-nilly by the Attorney General. So they have to support their idea that this is something the executive can do, that this is something the AG can do. And inevitably, I think this will be before the Supreme Court because it is such a fundamentally important issue, and it will be challenged in D.C. and it will be challenged in other jurisdictions as well. So we will get some clarity eventually from the Supreme Court. Until then, these cases aren't going anywhere. Florida is dead. There's no more indictment. That case is gone for now. D.C., that will inevitably be on hold beyond other reasons, for example, presidential immunity rulings, because that court needs to consider these arguments as well. And they will appeal that, and that is a process, and this is not something that will be resolved before the election. But it also shows you that this is really all the arguments that the Attorney General has made, all the arguments that the Democrats have made about Trump needing to stand trial and be served justice. They're not good arguments. They've proven to be legally unsound. And now it looks more like Donald Trump was right, and this is political persecution, not an actual legal prosecution.
Yeah, and speaking of that immunity case as well, if for some reason this opinion by the judge was overturned by either an 11th Circuit appeal or also the U.S. Supreme Court, would Trump and his lawyers have the ability to argue that the immunity case is yet another ground to dismiss the Florida case as well?
Well, they will if the Florida case ever does come back, but it may not be dismissed in its entirety. Both the beauty and the pain of the Supreme Court decision is that it will require courts to look fact by fact, issue by issue, everything that's alleged and charged, whether an indictment can be sustained when you consider presidential immunity. So that's not something that can be done quickly or easily. That's a process. And I think that if the courts can just dismiss these complaints because there is no power to appoint a special prosecutor to begin with, that's an easier way to dispose of these than having to go through a lengthy factual analysis of what's actually complained about.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And some people are suggesting that if this case is thrown, then the Hunter Biden case should also be thrown for special counsel. Just really quickly, do you agree with that assessment as well?
Big difference. Jack Smith was not in government. David Walsh was appointed as a U.S. attorney. He went through the confirmation process. So you don't have the same legal argument that can be made. He is a superior officer who went through confirmation. He can pursue those cases. In Florida, Jack Smith can't.
All right. And we'll have to leave it there. Gerard Filliti, really appreciate it. We'll be right back with more to talk more about the Trump assassination attempt and how conservatives and Christians should respond. My fellow Americans, we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an absolute disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a consistent issue, and high interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East that have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even amid the tensions. There are so many reasons that Americans just like you and me should consider investments in gold and silver, and Legacy Precious Metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com to download their free gold investing guide. I've read it and there is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is not the time to roll the dice with your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals today and tell them that I sent you. So, in the aftermath of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump on Saturday night, which just shocked the world, there have been a lot of responses, mostly political, from both sides. They're complaining about rhetoric. They're complaining about, the Secret Service protection. They're talking about how this actually impacts the election. But more than that, we as Christians and conservatives need to be talking about the personal response and how we can pray for President Trump and his family, and also the spiritual response of where does our country go from here? What can we actually do as Christians to affect a more perfect union as we continue to advance this American experiment? Well, I was listening to my good friend, Pastor Jack Hibbs, yesterday on Sunday, and I was so grateful that Sunday was the day after this so that we could all go to church and we could pray for President Trump. And that sermon, I would highly encourage all of you, go back and listen to Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills from yesterday. But this particular segment of the sermon was incredibly powerful. Listen to this.
When I saw that bloodied face in that ear, this is a strange connection, I know. But God said, all those who represent me in the priesthood, there's to be a sacrificial basin of blood. And I want the toe of the priest to be dipped in the blood, the big toe, the right toe, dipped in blood. I want the priest's thumb dipped in blood because his feet and his decision-making is covered in my blood. And then take the blood from the basin and put it on your right ear. Mr. President, if you're watching this right now, your right ear was bloodied. It wasn't your eye that got shot. It wasn't your nose that got shot. It wasn't your temple that was intended to be shot. Your ear was hit. But we would like and pledge and pray that you might bow your knee before the Lord Almighty and say, not only did God do this, because I know, Mr. President, you said that today, that God protected me. But who is God, Mr. President? Who is he? What's his name? You've heard it for years. It's time to bow the knee. It's time to say that Jesus Christ is Lord, that he's the one that rules over the affairs of men. He loves and died on the cross and rose again from the grave. It is Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And he desires that all men should come to worship him in spirit and in truth. This has been a warning by Almighty God that your ear might be sanctified. Will you hear this? Can you hear this? Listen to the word of God. Stop talking about God and come to know God. It makes all the difference in the world.
And Pastor Jack Hibbs from Chino Hills, Calvary Chapel, joins me now. And amen to that, Pastor Hibbs. I was applauding along with all of the parishioners there. And it's so true that there's a difference between talking about God and having a relationship with God.
Yeah, Jenna, you and I have been with the president over the years of his presidency, and there would be times even when we would gather around him and pray, and he would mention God. But I noticed all along the way, even though having given the gospel to him, like many others have, you just wonder, where is he regarding the actual person of Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior, as I said in that clip. And it's obvious. I mean, the whole world has seen this near-death experience of Donald J. Trump, and nobody can walk away and say, wow, was he lucky? I mean, people are just really, really dialing down on the fact that could have been any one of us at any given time. And he was millimeters, centimeters from eternity. And that being the case, it is really the open door for people like you and I, Jenna, to challenge President Trump about his personal relationship with Jesus. And so the clip that you just played, I know I must have hit some sort of a target with that, because there are those who are angry at me for saying that. But then there are those who reached out to me this morning and said, I'm going to get this message to the president. I'm going to get this to him. So, we'll leave the truth at that. But Jenna, more importantly, for such a time as this, what if, and you've seen that picture, Jenna, haven't you, where he's on the stage, almost on his face, and there's blood, and there's the feet of the Secret Service around him. He was forced to the ground by Secret Service. What if he willingly went to the ground to say, Jesus Christ is in fact my Lord? That's what we need to have happen.
Yeah, so well said. And this truly could be a moment that was meant for evil that God could use not only in President Trump's personal life and the life of his family, but also really for America. Because if America turns back to God, that's the only way that we will truly make America great again. And so for the Christian and for those of us who actually care about conservative values, beyond all of the political rhetoric or the parties, why is it so important in this moment not to just talk about the politics, but talk about the spiritual condition of America?
It's important for a lot of reasons. Number one is that you've got to look at the founding of America. And if people don't want to take the time to do that, they can easily do that, Jenna, by reading the 2 paragraphs of the Mayflower Compact. This nation was based on a Judeo-Christian biblical worldview. There is no escaping that. Having said that, when you look and read what Sam Adams had to say, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Jonathan Witherspoon, these founding fathers said that God has established this nation, that we are the stewards of what God has given us, and that a nation cannot rise without his aid and without his provision and protection. That said, this nation, as Adams said, is a nation that only operates with its form of government for a people who are religious and immoral people, and it is totally inadequate for the governance of any other. So having said that, Jenna, we've got all the right and the boldness as believers to stand up and say, listen, not only does the Word of God commission me to speak truth in all areas, but the First Amendment gives me the protective right to do that. And so more than ever, I'm calling upon everyone, Republican, Independent, Democrat, use your logic, know history, and can you do a little experiment with all of us? Can you give this a try? Can you actually vote different than what you have in the past? And just give us a try. Look what's happening in Louisiana, Tennessee, and Oklahoma, Jenna. You've reported on this stuff. You've got the governor of Tennessee proclaiming 31 days of prayer in July. You've got the school districts in all of Oklahoma posting the 10 Commandments, and I believe it's Louisiana, I might have that reversed, that is having the Bible placed in public schools to return back to our original educational document. This is how revival begins. It's possible.
Yes.
Now, look, if it happens in California, we're out.
Yeah. And, you are in California. We're praying for you in California. And I want to hold you over into the next segment, Pastor Jack Hibbs, because there's so much more to talk about. But we do have to exercise our first freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of association, free exercise of religion. Otherwise, what good are we doing if we're buying into this whole notion of separation of church and state? And we got to just keep it all locked away in our churches. No, this is about exercising civil society truth in community. That's our definition of politics. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Continuing my conversation with Pastor Jack Hibbs, who is the pastor of Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills in California, and we are praying for California. But where does the country go from here when we're seeing such a great strides in some of the states that are actually returning to biblical values and our founding, but then we see other states like California and New York and my former home state of Colorado that are still advocating for partial birth, state-funded abortion on demand. I mean, there is such a divide in this country. Can we ever find unity around truth again?
Well, thank you for putting it that way, Jenna, because there is only unity around truth. A lot of people want to just chat about unity. You can't have unity unless it's around truth. And so what has to happen is that pastors, to be quite honest with you, Christians start to speak up, pastors speak up, churches start to see their incredible divine calling to be salt and light in their very culture. I'm kind of like putting myself through a self-inflicted wound right now. I pastor a mega church, but I never asked to do that. It became that. I say that to say this. I haven't seen all that much good come out of mega churches. My point is, somebody might say, well, I only have a church of 50 people. This is exactly how it's supposed to work. If you and I own our community for Jesus, pray for it, pray for the mayor, pray for the city council, go to school board meetings, get involved. With the amount of Christians in this nation, if we began to represent Christ in the public square, because we've got pastors encouraging us to go do righteousness, it could change this nation. I mean this. I'm not being funny, and I'm not being cute. Jenna, this nation could change on a Sunday if Christians became salt and light again, like we've been commanded. It could change on any Sunday.
Yeah, I absolutely believe it. And this is what my good friend Abraham Hamilton III on American Family Radio, he's also our general counsel at the American Family Association. He always teaches live locally, influence your local communities. That starts with your own family. And then it starts with your community, your local church. And rather than trying to just sit back and complain at the national news every night and think, what does my one vote do? We have to start living locally. And we also have to stop retreating from some very obvious policy stances that we should be taking. I mean, you also in your message yesterday mentioned the RNC's platform that is now watered down on life and the definition of marriage that we can't change because that's biblical. It's an institution that God created. So many people who call themselves Christians are saying, oh, it doesn't matter. We just got to win. Well, my question for them, Pastor Hibbs, is what are we winning if we're not standing firm on truth?
Yeah, absolutely. Just because you might win doesn't mean it's approving of God. Look, here in California, our church, we have been very active. We've been in numerous lawsuits against the Secretary of State in California. I've sued the governor, and thank God we just won that. Why? It was biblical worldview values that were being brought under attack. Here's the thing. If we don't stand up for what's right, then we will absolutely lay down and be run over. And people feel like they don't have a voice. That's not true. If you claim the name of Jesus, you've got to understand something. The reason why we love reading the Bible, especially the Old Testament, is because it's the book of the underdog. David, there's no way that David should have been able to kill Goliath, but he did. There's no way that Jonathan could have ever done this with his armor bearer against such an incredible amount of soldiers, but he did. That's impossible, but they did. So now we come to this time where, well, how can I make a difference in my school board? I highly recommend this. Get a notepad and a paper and begin praying for your local government. When God speaks to you, and he's going to speak to you, he's going to say things like this. Call your mayor and tell him you're praying for him. Then you do that, friend. Don't call Jenna. Don't call Jack. You do it. God wants you to get involved. And you say, well, that's scary. Well, get in line and join the club. We're terrified every day. But it's a thrilling way to live out Christianity because it's anything but a spectator faith. And this nation knows that in its history.
Yes, so well said. And you've been under fire as recently as yesterday from Politico because you're willing to stand up and teach the truth. And so every Christian out there really needs to take this message to heart from Pastor Jack Hibbs. Get involved in your local community. We'll be right back with more. Well, friends, you might have heard that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, so they want to pass along the savings directly to you by having a $25 extravaganza. I love that word, extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. To get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, also awesome, only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are $25. And brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. For the first time ever, the premium MyPillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, or call 800-564 800-564-8475 today. That's 800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna. So what actually happened with the failures of Secret Service and local law enforcement with this attempted assassination of President Trump on Saturday night? So let's bring in John Cardillo, who is former NYPD. And John, you posted this on X, on social media, and I'm so used to calling them tweets, but it's like a post or an X or whatever now. But you said the shooter was about 150 yards from Trump on a rooftop with a direct line of sight to the stage. It defies every security protocol ever written that this rooftop was not secured and law enforcement personnel was not standing up there. So let's zoom into this photograph now that you posted as well. And you can see that pin, that red pin that says shooter, and then there's like this direct line down to that blue pin that is labeled Trump. I mean, that is really close. And it does defy logic, John, that this rooftop was not secured. And I'm also seeing some reporting today suggesting that this was local law enforcement that was responsible. But ultimately, isn't the Secret Service kind of responsible for everything when it comes to presidential security?
Yeah, so the Secret Service, and great to be with you, Jenna, as always, the Secret Service would be the incident commanders, right, for lack of a better term. So the Secret Service they're going to run all security, and state troopers, and they, as Pennsylvania State Police, have their own SWAT operators, and they're proficient guys and girls, as well as local law enforcement. And your snipers are always going to be typically SWAT people, right, because those are the units that train on long range shooting. So that all being said, it really shouldn't have mattered who the counter sniper teams were. The Secret Service would have been incident command. But to my point I made in that post, and you're hearing the Dan Bonginos of the world, you're hearing Jeff Cortese's of the world. Jeff's a buddy of mine. He's out there. He was FBI, and he was on the Capitol Police speaker detail. You're hearing all of these people. And now we're talking about, literally, Jenna, thousands of years of collective law enforcement experience with the 100 or so people that I've watched comment on this. And there's an interesting phenomenon. It's the first time I've ever seen a controversial issue on social media have general consensus. No one who's ever worked in law enforcement is disagreeing with one another. It is unheard of. It is unfathomable. Like I said, it defies every protocol ever written with regards to personal protective details, especially that of a former president, the Republican nominee, and presumably the next president, that rooftop wouldn't have been secured. That would have been the first thing you did. Somebody asked me yesterday, what I would liken it to. And I said, for me, first thing that came to my mind, a surgeon not washing his hands before he walks into the operating room. It's just not done. It's muscle memory. It's SOP. It's critical. It's just not done. It's never not done.
So what do you attribute this to? I mean, there have been also multiple reports that, there was a beefed up detail that was sent to First Lady Jill Biden. There have been reports that maybe, some DEI influence. There have been calls, I think, and I would agree with them, calls for the head of the Secret Service to resign over this. But then there's also, kind of the conspiracy theory land that, that the Secret Service intentionally turned a blind eye to this, and this was some kind of deep state op. So what do we know now that we could possibly attribute this to without kind of going into maybe some of the more potentially interesting possibilities?
Well, look, we know each other a long time. I'm not conspiratorial. Do I think this was, the movie JFK and the CIA was it? No, that's all silly. Here's what I believe is happening. And I gleaned some information from two very good sources inside the Department of Homeland Security. The Secret Service right now is horribly short-staffed. And that's for a host of reasons. And that goes to DEI and wokeness in law enforcement and good people resigning to go to the private sector and make more money. But it's also because Secret Service, once you get past the glamour of the United States Secret Service, it's kind of a tough job for your first 10 years. The travel is exhaustive. Everybody thinks it's that movie In the Line of Fire with Clint Eastwood and it's this glamorous job where you protect presidents. But the reality is when you're a new agent, you work on counterfeiting, you work on credit card fraud, you're working in boring field offices on boring financial crimes. And you may supplement a protective detail, but you're not really doing the fun stuff until later on in your career, the glamorous stuff, the interesting stuff.
And even then, the travel's exhaustive. So the Secret Service has always had one of the worst retention rates. And believe it or not, even though their mission is to guard the president, they've never had these massive budgets where they could create a better quality of work life for the agents. So what I was told by two very well-placed, one high-ranking source in Department of Homeland Security, is that the staffing is so bad that Secret Service is having to do 21-day details for agents. They're pulling agents from other agencies under the Department of Homeland Security, whether it be ICE or Homeland Security investigations. They're being detailed to Secret Service for 21 days, but they're not receiving the same training. And that was pretty evident in what you saw yesterday. So I think this is a byproduct of a short-staffed agency that doesn't have tremendous budgets, and that agency's staffing issues trickling down to them having to bring people from other agencies under their parent agency who don't have that same critical training. I think that's what we saw yesterday, a complete systemic breakdown. Every link, Jenna, in the chain snapped. It wasn't one, it wasn't two. It was slow reaction speed. Trump threw himself on the ground before his agents covered him. The agents allowing Trump to stand there and fist pump, an iconic photo that'll go down in history. But from a security standpoint, it never should have been allowed to happen. Down to those counter snipers delaying because they weren't getting the green light to fire. A complete breakdown due to personnel not trained to do that job.
And that makes so much more sense, I think, John, than, some of these more, this was a deep state op, or this was, somebody that was intentionally, within trying to take him out, some of those things that there were just failures. And we've seen with a lot of really just unfortunate and horrible tragedies. I mean, we look at the Baltimore Bridge scenario, by the way. I mean, just how many things had to go wrong and did go wrong for that to occur. I mean, we look at a lot of the failures that happen, if there is another type of a national crisis. I mean, when, the last passenger plane, has gone down. I mean, some of those things that are just failures, and you ultimately go back and you see all of those links in the chains breaking. And this does beg the question whether we need to have a more attention that's paid. I mean, I would so much rather have budget go to Secret Service and presidential detail protection, have enough protection for maybe, RFK Jr. as well, for example, than send a bunch of money to Ukraine. I mean, what exactly are we doing that we're not giving sufficient budget to things as basic as presidential detail?
Yeah, I mean, one of the words I always use when I watch things like this is choreography, right? Because the Secret Service is supposed to be a tier 1 law enforcement unit. So if you watch tier 1 military units practice or operate, Delta, SEAL Team 6, I know these guys very well. I have some experience in what they do. It's choreography. It's flawless. And if you watch, yesterday I posted on X a video of Reagan's agents 40 plus years ago. Their choreography was flawless. They were big guys. They protected Reagan. They got him in the car. One of them took a bullet. But if you watch the way they move, it was fluid. It was choreographed. The same as if you watch a tier 1 team, Delta or SEAL Team 6, sweep a building, close quarter combat, clear rooms. We didn't see that yesterday. This was clearly a group of agents. And those of us who have worked in this world can look at this. This was a group of people that had not worked and trained together. It wasn't flawless. It was chaotic. There's that image now of that one female agent who couldn't even holster her weapon. But even worse, when she couldn't holster her weapon, she flagged the backs of the other agents with her muzzle. I mean, there were so many things that are just unheard of. And you attribute that to one thing, poor or no training, because you could tell these people were not trained cohesively. There wasn't a consistent training protocol.
And I think that those are all really important observations. And, I've been to, dozens of these Trump rallies, and it is so routine. It is so choreographed. And no matter what the venue is, whether it's inside a stadium or it's outdoors, this wasn't the first outdoor location. These types of things are standard. It's routine. It's been choreographed, for the last, almost 10 years now. So the fact that this kind of oversight and breakdown could happen, I think begs a lot of questions. I'm very interested, John, in seeing what the Speaker Johnson and the House Oversight Committee gets to the bottom of in terms of Secret Service accountability. And the American people do deserve answers here. And it's not just about Donald Trump. I'd be asking the same questions if this was Joe Biden as well. So thanks, John, for your analysis. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. My fellow Americans, we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an absolute disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a consistent issue, and high interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East that have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even amid the tensions. There are so many reasons that Americans just like you and me should consider investments in gold and silver, and Legacy Precious Metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com to download their free gold investing guide. I've read it and there is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is not the time to roll the dice with your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals today and tell them that I sent you. So as the RNC convention begins in Milwaukee, Wisconsin today, there is a coalition of pro-life and conservative voices that are still urging the RNC to change its platform back to being more strongly pro-life. And this, of course, coming in the aftermath of former President Trump and that assassination attempt, where some people are suggesting that, now is not the time to rock the boat or to make any of these changes. Well, the changes have already occurred. And it's my strong belief that in the midst of this just incredibly tragic situation that unfolded on Saturday, conservatives and Christians need to stand even more strongly for life. So this is the coalition letter and a part of what is urging the RNC. So, quote, for the first time in decades, the Republican platform retreats on life. Pro-life Americans are rightly outraged and gravely concerned. As drafted, the platform removes longstanding Republican promises on life, from prohibiting taxpayer funding for abortion to a constitutional amendment to specific protections for unborn babies. Since 1976, the platform has supported a human life amendment to the Constitution. Since 1980, the platform has called for ending taxpayer funding for abortion. Since 1984, the platform has affirmed that the 14th Amendment already protects unborn children. Beginning in 1996, the platform condemned partial birth abortion. In 2004, language was added to protect babies born alive following failed abortions. In 2012, language was added to protect pain-capable babies. In 2016, language was added opposing federal funding for embryo harvesting. Since the Reagan Revolution, the party has spoken with an unambiguous voice. Republicans stand for life. Today, that promise has been watered down and ultimately compromised. As you gather in Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention, the eyes of conservatives across America are upon you. As delegates, ensuring a strong platform is your responsibility. You are the grassroots conservative leaders entrusted by the conservatives of your states to represent their values at the national level. This is the last opportunity to restore the Republican Party's strong pro-life platform. So John Shelton, who is a policy advisor for Advancing American Freedom, which is the coalition leader that now has over 100 pro-life organizations and conservative voices, including me, my boss, Tim Wildman, who is the president of the American Family Association, and also our general counsel, Abraham Hamilton III, have all signed this letter. And John, I think the important consideration here that's being lost on many is that this isn't asking to change the platform from what it was. It's asking to restore the life-affirming message that was already there. It was the RNC that has created this controversy really unnecessarily.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. This isn't asking for something that's out of reach. This is saying just preserve the language that brought us to the party, that brought our parents to the party and generations before, and that has led the party faithfully for the last several decades, nearly half a century.
Yeah, and so what practically should happen at the RNC? I mean, the convention started today. So what can the delegates do if we wish to return to the platform as it was in 2016?
Well, I think first and foremost, the delegates should try to push to amend the language to restore it to the 2016 platform, which Phyllis Schlafly said was the most proud platform she ever had a chance to vote on. I think that's what we want. We saw on Saturday that people rallied to courage. They saw the courage of the president amid the assassination attempt, and they rallied to that. I think we need a platform that people can rally to.
Yeah, and
then
certainly
second,
a lot of. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, second, if we don't have the votes to restore the language, what we absolutely need to do is set a flag with a minority report, which is a lower threshold that just says, a good part of the party is not comfortable with this language. It's not the party that we were won by. It's doesn't represent the party that we want to see represented in Washington, D.C. And so I think whether it's amending the platform or it's issuing this minority report about the language, I think either of those would be great to preserve the inertia that was passed on to us by generations beforehand.
Yeah, and a lot of conservatives are saying, hey, you won, Roe versus Wade was overturned, so this issue should just go back to the states. But it's really important to point out that the RNC platform has always contained language supporting a human life amendment, supporting the 14th Amendment, and so these were excised out of the platform. So for organizations that are still looking to join in this letter, how can they join and hopefully encourage the delegates to change this platform back?
You can reach out to your state party. I think that's one of the most influential places you can be contacting right now. And you can continue to make noise until this is set in stone, because right now it's not set in stone. Right now is the time to push.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for Advancing American Freedom and all of the organizations that have joined this coalition to stand firmly for life. And so, John Shelton, thank you so much for your effort, and to everyone who has signed this coalition letter. I've posted information on my X account on if you are a principal organization or you're just a conservative voice that wants to join, you can still reach out. There is still time. I'll see you tomorrow night.